fraudulent tactics that were used by Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was actually fined for using a peeping stone. They have the court record of it, the Temple Lot court case, and Joseph Smith would say, I can find hidden treasure for you, and he would dig for it, and he said, well, it's not there, dig over there. Finally, somebody sued him and won in court. Fraudulent tactics. But I think perhaps the most fraudulent tactic most generally used by cults in America today is the use of deceptive terminology, deliberately taking our terms like resurrection when they mean reincarnation. Now, there's a world of difference between resurrection and reincarnation. Resurrection is the soul coming back to the same body. Reincarnation is the soul going into another body. Resurrection occurs only once. You die once, and you're going to be resurrected once. Reincarnation occurs over and over and over again. Resurrection is to an immortal, imperishable body that won't have the 5 Bs. You won't get bald head and bifocals and bridges and bay window and bunions. You don't get those in the resurrection body. But reincarnation, you get reincarnated into the same mortal body, to another mortal body that dies again. Vast difference between the two, and they know it. And yet they use our term because they know it will deceive Christians. I was on a radio program in Chicago a number of years ago, and they had, the Buddhist and the Hindu and then the token Christian there. And they asked us all what we believed, just for a short starter. And so I always carry a big black Bible with me, a huge black Bible, and open it up, and lay it right there because that scares them. And I had my big black Bible open there, and I wanted to use something everybody knew about. And I said, I'm a Bible-believing Christian. I believe, like Billy Graham does, that you all have to be born again. And the Buddhist over there said, born again, that's like the cycles of nature. It's born again every spring, isn't it? It's using our term with a totally different meaning in it to deceive people. Or a favorite term of the New Agers, the Christ. The Christ. You know what they mean? They mean an occult leader. They don't mean Jesus Christ, who is the Son of God. They mean an office, the Christ office, that you can get. You can attain Christhood yourself. Very deceptive use of terms. And then again, I repeat, they're very aggressive proselytizers. The Boston Church of Christ are very aggressive people who are out buttonholing people, trying to get them into the Boston church. But notice the difference. Most cults are aggressive evangelizers, but not all aggressive evangelizers are cults. I would say Campus Crusade are aggressive evangelizers, but they're not a cult. Jews for Jesus are aggressive evangelizers, but they're not a cult. I'm not saying that all aggressive evangelizers are cults. I'm saying most of the cults are aggressive evangelizers, which is quite different. All horses have 4 legs, but not all 4-legged things are horses. Secondly, I'd like to say a few words about how many cults are there. Now that we've defined a cult doctrinally, socially, morally, methodologically, we have a handle on what it means to be a cult. How many cults are there? Well, some say there are about 700 different cults. Others say there are 3,000 cults. I would say that the latter number is closer to the truth. We do know that there are over 20 million people in America who are involved in some cult or another. It's a massive amount of people, and they're multiplying at an alarming rate, at a frightening rate in our country. And if we would broaden our definition to include others, as, let's say, the Nation of Islam, which is one of the fastest growing groups in America, black Muslims are growing at one of the fastest rates of any particular religion or cultic group in America. By the year 2080, 51% of all blacks will be Muslim in America at the present rate of growth. Now, when you consider that almost 100% of blacks were Christians to begin with, to say that there'll be 51% by 2080 is a scary figure. In fact, one out of every 5 persons on earth is a Muslim. Second largest religion in the world, a religion dedicated to your annihilation, by the way, because they believe that they are the true religion and they are destined to rule the world, and that Christianity is not only false, but Christians have committed blasphemy by saying there's more than one person in God. And the more radical members who believe in jihad believe that it's right in the name of Allah to annihilate people like us who believe that. I wrote a book titled Answering Islam. Some time ago I received a call from a chaplain in a California prison before my book came out. And he said, "Are you going to put your name on it?" My co-author, who is a converted Muslim, used a pseudonym. He said, "Are you putting your name on it?" I said, "Yes." He said, "If I were you, I wouldn't. Because in prisons, the black Muslims are taking over, and they're a very violent group." And he said, "Your life will be in danger." Well, for to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain, Philippians 1:21. Thirdly, why are the cults growing? One noted cult researcher said it well. Cults live on the unpaid bills of the church. Do you know why cults are growing? Because we in the church neglected some truth, some doctrine, something that we should be doing. And they grew out of that unpaid bill in the church. The failure of the church is the fodder of the cults. For example, let's talk about some ecclesiastical failure in the church. The failure of the church to teach sound doctrine. One of the reasons people are falling for error is they aren't taught the truth. One of the reasons they're going for counterfeits is they don't know what the genuine is. Now, I blame both liberalism and evangelicalism for this. Liberalism has been teaching false doctrine for years. They deny the virgin birth. They deny the deity of Christ. They deny the bodily resurrection. They deny the inspiration of the Bible. And evangelicalism is teaching very little doctrine. And there's not much difference. In fact, I would say I would rather hear somebody teaching false doctrine. At least they believe something is true, even though they got the wrong thing and are teaching error. But the people who are saying, look, truth isn't important, this may be true to you, but it's not true to someone else, or the people who are saying doctrine is not important. All that's important is experience. Hold hands together for Jesus. Do you get a good feeling? Church, in America today, the dominant theme is entertainment. And if a church does not entertain people, people don't go back. Why? Because they don't feel good when they leave the service. Well, I've got news for you. The purpose of the church is not to make you feel good, it's to make you be good. The purpose of the church is not to make you happy, it's to make you holy. And God is far more interested in our holiness than He is our happiness. There is no verse in Leviticus that says, "I am happy, saith the Lord, be ye happy." There is a verse that says 3 times, "I am holy, be ye holy." And we have lost the concept of holiness, and we have turned it into the concept of happiness. God is a cosmic hedonist, a cosmic utilitarianism, who's trying to bring the greatest happiness to the greatest number in the long run. The evangelical church, I was asked by a group in Vienna, a little Croatian group that I spoke to last May when I was over there, tell me about the church in America. I said, I'll tell you about it. It's 3,000 miles wide and about an inch deep. Doctrinally, as I'll show in a moment, the church in America is in tragic situation, and we're paying the price for it because we've taught no doctrine or false doctrine, and along come the cults and live on the unpaid bills of the church. Philosophically, the growth of relativism in our society. That may be true for you, but that's not true for me. Have you ever heard that? Everything is relative to the situation. Cults grow on that. They start, in California, they start every other day. They grow up like mushrooms in a hothouse. because relativism is so blatant out there that I preached at a very good conservative church in San Diego. And the pastor said, don't bother to preach the Bible. Our people don't even believe in truth. Would you give a message on truth is absolute? Because they didn't believe in absolute truth. And after I did, I had student after student, person after person come up to me and say, I've been going to this church. I've had the experience, I've had the blessing, but I never believed in absolute truth. And this is the first time I've ever heard a defense of absolute truth. Mystically, there's a reason why the cults are growing. The growth of Eastern religions. What's happened in our society can be summarized this way. Up until 1960, from 1620 to 1960, that's a long time, we had a basic Judeo-Christian ethic that dominated America. Between 1960 and 1980, the humanists took over, and the society became dominated by Western humanism, which teaches directly contrary to the Declaration of Independence, which says Creator, creation, and God-given moral absolutes. That dominated from 1620 to 1960, and from 1960 to 1980, the belief that there is no Creator, no creation, and no God-given moral absolutes was institutionalized by the Supreme Court. They ruled that it is unconstitutional to teach Creator, creation, or God-given moral absolutes in a public school between 1960 and 1980. Meanwhile, while they were destroying the Judeo-Christian ethic in America, while we turned from theism to atheism, pantheism of the East came in. Through the Beatles first in the 60s and their songs where they had, in My Sweet Lord, where they sang Hallelujah and then worked Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Later in the Star Wars series of George Lucas, which he got from Carlos Castaneda's novels, and he worked in Eastern religion, Zen Buddhism, feel the force flow. Close your eyes, don't trust your senses, don't trust your mind, just feel the force flow. And all of these Eastern religions came flooding in and engulfed us in America. So we have the philosophical, the mystical reason. We have the ecclesiastical reason that's growing. Then there's a psychological reason that cults are growing. It's what I call the growth of selfism. The humanistic influence, do your own thing, every man for himself. It started with secular psychology, self-esteem. If there's anything that I'm sick and tired of hearing is Christians teaching courses on raising your self-esteem. God is trying to lower your self-esteem, and psychologists are trying to raise your self-esteem. The Bible is trying to get us to understand that we're low-down, wicked sinners, and they want us to feel that we're God. You know, Shirley MacLaine waves at the ocean and says, I am God, I am God. I expect lightning to hit her, but God's more gracious than I am. Raising your self-esteem, God wanting to lower it. There's another reason. It's a personal one, the growth of subjectivism. If it feels good, do it. In fact, Shirley MacLaine wrote a book titled Out on a Limb, where she surely was when she wrote it. And another one called Dancing in the Light, which I subtitle Stumbling in the Dark. And she says, quote, put your left brain aside. That's the part that analyzes, thinks. Your right brain is intuitive. Put your left brain aside. As a matter of fact, don't think. That's a sure disaster, a sure formula for disaster in America. The growth of subjectivism. Also, morally, I think what we fail to remember, because some people who get trapped in cults come from very fine Christian families. They were taught the truth. They had love, they had a sense of family, but they still get involved in a cult. Why do they get involved? One simple reason: moral rebellion. Moral rebellion, depravity. In the 70s, the anti-establishment, the anti-government, anti-home, anti-church, anti-family. If you reared teenagers in the 70s, and we did, we had 6 children, 5 of them were teenagers at the same time, from 19 to 13. You know how difficult it was, even in a Christian home where they were taught the truth, to keep people from this rebellious attitude that had taken over our society. We thank God that our children survived, and 3 of them are in full-time ministry today, but it was not easy because of the philosophy of the day and the moral rebellion that had taken over our society, which leads me to the last characteristic, and that is the social breakdown of family values leads to many, many cults. Walter Martin, one of the greatest cult experts in America, said, "We see a generation without a sense of history, cut off from the past, alienated from the present, having a fragmented concept of the future. The now generation is in reality a lost generation." Now, having said that about the cults, I turn to my 4th point. What makes a cult so dangerous? Why are cults dangerous? And I ask the question, first of all, about spiritual danger of a cult. Why is a cult dangerous spiritually? Because error is always dangerous. It misleads. The devil is the father of lies. He was a liar from the beginning, the Bible tells us. All error is inspired of the devil. 1 Timothy 4:1 says, "The Spirit speaks expressly that in latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of demons." If you believe a lie, you're already deceived. If you act on a lie, you're already in danger. For example, you come to a railroad crossing, and it's flat. The flashing sign is on there, and somebody says to you, "It's just stuck. It's just stuck." And you go across, and the train hits you. You believed a lie, and you lost your life. If someone says to you, "The ice is very thick, it's at least 1.5 feet thick," and you start to walk on it, and you go under, and you believed a lie, you realize that it's dangerous to act on a lie. If someone says, "This is a 2-way street," and you have a head-on collision, you believed a lie. It's a very serious thing to believe what is false. We have a local Jewish talk show in Charlotte. It's on at 11 o'clock at night, and the gentleman who heads it up is a Hasidic Jew. He's a pantheist. He believes God is all, God is the grass. We asked him one night, if the cow eats the grass, then is the cow eating God? He said, "Well, to tell you the truth, the only time my belief bothers me is when I mow the grass." He's mowing God. So we asked him, "Well, what if the cow eats the grass and part of the grass becomes dung? Is God now dung?" He said, "Well, I don't carry it that far." Fortunately, didn't carry it that far. Well, he wanted to get me to admit that all evangelicals were narrow-minded people who are going around saying everybody else is false and you have the truth. And his name was Jerry Klein. And I said, "Let me ask you this," because we had a counter-cult conference and had people there speaking on the various cults, and he was saying, "Well, are you going to be criticizing other people's beliefs? Are you going to be saying other people are false and you have the truth?" And I said, "Jerry, suppose somebody else in this town claimed to be Jerry Klein, started another show on another station and called it the Jerry Klein Show, and taught things that were against your most cherished beliefs, like he taught anti-Semitism, and he taught there was no Holocaust. Would you expose him as a fraud and a counterfeit and say that's not the true Jerry Klein and that's not what the true Jerry Klein believes?" That's exactly what we're doing as Christians. Someone comes along and says, "I'm a Christian and Jesus Christ is just Michael the Archangel." We're going to expose him because that's false. And that's what Jehovah's Witnesses are teaching. After he tried that a couple times, he gave up on trying to push that any farther. Psychologically, I would suggest that cults are dangerous because they prey on the vulnerable. They seek out loners and lavish love on them. This Mooney girl that we helped win to the Lord said, "I've never been loved so much in my life. The first night with this group of Moonies, everybody stroked me. Everybody loved me." They seek out loners and lavish love on them. Physically, Many cults are dangerous to health or life. Hobart Freeman, who started as a professor in a very good seminary, Grace Seminary, in Winona Lake, Indiana, and who left that and started the Faith Assembly Church in Fort Wayne, and who taught people to throw away their medicine even if they were severely ill. 52 people connected with his congregation died. Hobart Freeman himself died because he threw away his heart medicine and ultimately died of heart problems. One of the most tragic stories I ever heard was a story about the Parker boy, whose parents eventually wrote a book titled "We Let Our Son Die." He had diabetes, and the evangelist prayed for him, pronounced him healed, and said, don't give him insulin anymore, he's completely cured. But the boy still had the symptoms, so the evangelist said, God is testing your faith. The symptoms are there, but the disease is gone. Just believe God. They believed the evangelist, and the boy died, and they were taken to court and charged and convicted of negligent homicide and sentenced to prison before they woke up and said, we let our son die. Cults are not only out there, cults are inside the Christian church. Jim Jones led 913 people to a suicide pact, and the Branch Davidians, 85 people burned to death. I would say that they're not only spiritually and psychologically, but physically dangerous. But I'd like to say, finally, this word. It's not simply spiritually and educationally, but we've got a great job ecclesiastically to do in counteracting the cults, because inside the Christian church today, not out there, not the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons and the New Agers of this world, but right inside the Christian church, we've got so many cults and so much cultic teaching that it's absolutely pathetic. And before I mention some, let me mention this, that the Apostle Paul in the New Testament in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 17 and 18, named the people inside the church. Hymenaeus and Philetus. 2 Timothy 3:8, Janes and Jambres. 3 John 9, Diotrephes, he named the people by name, said they're teaching false doctrine. Now, why do I say that? Because that's the inspired basis for what I'm about to say to you. I'm going to name names of people who are teaching things that if they belong to a cult, we would be condemning. And yet we tolerate it inside the Christian church. Number one, Robert Schuller. Quote, Jesus never called anyone a sinner, and I'm not going to either. End quote. That is rank unorthodoxy. Jesus did say people were sinners. Jesus did pronounce sin. Read Matthew chapter 23. See if he called people worse than sinners. Vipers, whitewashed sepulchre, dead men's bones. If Robert Schuller says that you do not call people sinners, then Robert Schuller is not preaching the gospel. You know why? Read it, 1 Corinthians 15. The gospel is that Jesus died for our sins, according to the Scripture. You don't preach sin, you're not preaching the gospel. The sugar-coated pill of make Jesus your guru and he'll make you feel better, or get the be happy attitudes and that's going to do it for you, is not the gospel. And the time has come in America for us to expose people who are teaching false doctrine.